welcome to English today. So, as you can see, we're doing it on a different format today. So instead of me standing being recorded, you're just going to hear my voice and see some slides. So what I'd really like you to do is follow this film, follow the recording, and just tell me what you think. Do you like this method more, or would you prefer it that we do it like we do in class and I video myself? Anyway, so today we're going to be drafting a poem, going to gather ideas and start to write the poem. And tomorrow you're going to be thinking about perfecting it, editing it, improving it. So we're going to be using alliteration and personification. So you should have read the poem The Taper. It's all about a poet reading alone in his hut by the light of a flickering taper. The taper, of course, in this case means a candle. A taper, a modern day version of taper, is normally a long, thin piece of paper that you might light a fire with or light a candle with. But in this case, it's actually a candle. And what we've been looking at is the alliteration and the personification. So we've got, if you look in green, all the words that are beginning with the F sound. So we've got flickering, flying, flapping, flittery, flame, flew into the fire, fluttering, frantically flapping. You've got the idea of the F sound, and what it does is it mimics the sound that a moth might make by a light. You may have seen, I don't know if any of you have ever been camping, but if ever you go camping and you've got your camping light in the tent, and on a summer's night you've got the door open because it's warm, and all the moths and the insects come in and they flutter around the light because they're so attracted to it. They can't help themselves. This is not sort of instinctive thing that moths and insects do. I don't know whether they know that they could hurt themselves. I'm sure they do feel the pain if they do go too near the flame or the bulb, because light bulbs get incredibly hot too. So it's the story of these insects. So the poet was sitting in his hut, and the shadows played gracefully, stretching in the shapes on the luminous face of the paper. And you've got these words, then from the darkness came flying and flapping a flittery creature of night. It sounds like a moth, the way the moth would dance around the flame. It circled the flame of the taper, entranced by a dangerous dance of the light. So we've got alliteration with dangerous dance as well. But I'll explain why I've put them in purple in a minute. The poet's attention, so he notices it's torn from his page. I like that, torn from the page, because again, a page tears, doesn't it? So his attention is torn as the creature flew into the fire. And he sat for a moment and thought of the strangeness of dangerous thrill and desire. So that verse is all about thinking that some of the things that we do are really dangerous, but gosh, you still want to do it. A little bit like, I suppose, going on a roller coaster. You're absolutely scared, you don't want to go on it, but you still enjoy the thrill of surviving the whole terrible ride. And then he thinks to himself, I would sit here reading, said the poet, by the taper's flickering light, but I see how the flame entices as they all glimpse it, the fluttering creatures of night. So he's seeing how all these moths and insects cannot help themselves. They have to come in and dance around his flame. And I see how they suffer, frantically flapping as fire bites into their wings. And then he realizes, until I can no longer relish. And can you notice that the sounds, the F sounds of the flapping, the only F that we've got of alliterative is the fingers. So it's all stopped in the last three verses because the moth has now gone. Until I can no longer relish for all of its virtues, the knowledge of my bright light brings. And so I shall blow out the taper. So he's thinking, he's being really empathetic and sympathetic to these insects. And he snuffs out the light so that the insects won't be, they won't want to come back. So I shall blow out the taper, and then with moist fingers, I'll snuff out its dwindling spark. And then he's finally going to sit in the silence, enlightened. And enlightened is a state of understanding. It's that idea of, I've learned something today. If you're enlightened, you've learned something and you're using that learning to make life better. So he's sitting in the silence and he's thinking that he's done a good thing and reading the ponderous book of the dark. So he's reading the dark. And we talked about that when we talked about darkness. We thought that the dark allows us to think, doesn't it? It allows us to stop and rest and think. So have you thought about, maybe we've got the alliteration in green. What is the purple? If you have a little good look at the video and pause for a second and just have a look at what the purple might be. So you've looked at the purple phrases: the shadows played gracefully, luminous face of the paper, entranced by the dangerous dance, the flame entices and fire bites. Yes, you've got it right. It's the personification. Fire cannot bite, but we know that if we touch fire, we're going to feel the pain equivalent to a bite. So, moving on, we're going to be using it in our own poem. So what I'd like you to do today, this is the whole lesson: write a descriptive poem about a moth flying around a candle. So we're going to be thinking about the flame. We're going to use lots of alliteration. For example, moth flaps, flutters and flickers in the darkness. You've got again that mimicking. Moth loves the licking flames of light. Moth is magnetized and mesmerized. To be magnetized is to be drawn to something that you cannot stop yourself. Mesmerized is you cannot take your eye off something. So the F sounds in the alliteration add to the idea of that fluttering the moth. It mimics the sounds of its wings. So how do we start? Well, I'd like you to think about how a moth might move about the light, how it's feeling, how it dances and skims. It might know that the flame's dangerous. I mean, it might not be able to help itself. It just is drawn there and it knows that it's going to get pulled. Think about how it's attracted and cannot resist, like a magnet is pulled towards another magnet. You know, there's nothing that can stop it. And it's forced by an unknown attraction to come. So I'd like you to try some sentences, first of all, just using similes and metaphors. Remember, similes you use as and like, and metaphors you describe something as if it was something else. So the fire's teeth is a metaphor that bites. You know, that idea of a metaphor. A fire doesn't have teeth, but you can say it has them. That is a metaphor. The fire is like biting teeth. It's a simile. But you know that. We've done that before. So then, when you've just had a few goes at a few sentences, a few similes or metaphors, or just sentences that you think you might use the ideas for, I'd like you to go back to the thesaurus and have a look at dancing, flying, and circling. Just list them like we did in the dark. Maybe words that describe desire. When you desire something, it's not like just liking it. You have to have it. So make a list and then choose some of those words, especially the verbs that personify, and any words that start with the same sound or letter, so you could alliterate them. So we can use these just like we did in our last poem. So the one I came up with today, so I was thinking about those, you know, I looked at my thesaurus and I looked at the dance and I saw swirling. So I went with swirling, and you'll see some more as we go along. So swirling helplessly, it dances the dance of death. Thrilled by the shining, shimmery light, it succumbs to its fate of fluttering flame. Succumbs means it gives itself up. No escape from this deathly desire. The flame entices, teases, and enthralls as it frantically flaps to its doom. Frolicking, swirling, twisting, flittering, it licks the loving light. There we've got the LLL, and falls to feel the sunlight on its wings again. An eternal longing now gone in a flash of flame. So that was my idea. You can use some of those words, please do. Again, I want you to try and imagine how that moth is feeling as it dances and flutters around the flame. And how would you feel as it swirled and it was drawn closer and closer, knowing full well that that could be its death. So I'd like you to have a go today. And tomorrow what we're going to be looking at is improving and editing, and I will show you how tomorrow I'm going to edit this, make it sound so much better. Anyway, have a go, send them in to me please. If you want to video yourself reading out your poem, that would be superb. I've had a couple already and I like to share them on our pages so that you can see everyone else doing their performance poetry. But have a good go. You can flick through the video again and just have a look at the different pages, and just good luck. I hope you can really manage it, but do use the thesaurus to help you, because that's where you're going to get all of your lovely vocabulary from. Okay guys, see you tomorrow.